Welcome, everyone. My name is Shirley Bendak. I'm the VP of Strategy Innovation for the SWAN Forum, the leading global hub for the Smart Water Organization, joined here by fellow colleagues and friends from across SWAN and from across our membership. So welcome. Just for anyone asking, I know we're getting some messages about this. This webinar will be recorded, so don't worry if you're missing out on every single line. We will be able to recap this for all of you. So with that, I want to welcome you really on behalf of SWAN and the SWAN Americas Alliance to the 13th webinar on data optimization, from bridging silos to quantifying outcomes. You'll hear here from some fantastic speakers. We put some of the company presenters today on the board, and later you'll be introduced to all of them. So with that, just a quick brief introduction about SWAN. Just Shane, if you don't mind moving to the next slide. A little bit about us and hopefully why you're here also. SWAN is leading global hub for the smart water sector. We focus on drinking water, wastewater, and also stormwater networks. We're a global nonprofit. We bring together those key players from across the industry, from utilities to solution providers, and look to accelerate the awareness and adoption of data-driven tools and technologies. We're amplified, our work is amplified by regional alliances, work groups, and affiliates, again, around the world, from our focus on young professionals to our focus across the Americas, the host of today's webinar. You can learn more on the website, and we'll be sure to drop in more information as the webinar moves on. Next slide, please. A little bit of our ecosystem and type of members we attract. This is our SWAN member ecosystem, again, showing members from across utilities and regulators. We are very much a global organization working with utilities of all sizes and around the world. We're home to leading design engineering firms, and then solution software companies, from information management all the way to software and wastewater management. So really exciting, and to see a lot of scaling and a lot of growth across our membership. And thank you again for supporting us in our work. Next slide, before I hand things off to Brent, today's moderator. If you are excited about SWAN and our activities and our events, this is our flagship event. It's coming back strong in person with some hybrid elements end of May. So May 24th to 26th, we'll be in Washington, DC for our 12th annual conference. There's right now an open registration, a call for speaker abstracts and sponsorship opportunities. It really is the flagship event for the smart water sector. So we encourage you to save these dates and come join us in DC. And one of the main reasons we're hosting in DC is really to the growth and popularity of the SWAN Americas Alliance. Next slide. And with that, I definitely want to make sure we have enough time for all of our presenters. I want to introduce today's moderator, Brent Thompson, who's also the co-lead of the SWAN Americas Alliance Events Group. Brent, handing things over to you.
Thanks, Shirley. Yeah, so I'll keep this quick. My name is Brent Thompson. I work for Badger now. I was the general manager for SCAN in North America. I've been with them for about 10 years now. I'll keep this short. Get to the main event. Let's go to the next slide real quick. Quickly touch on the SWAN Americas Alliance. And this is something I've been involved with for quite some time now. As Shirley said, I'm the co-lead of our events subgroup with Alex out of LIDWP. I don't believe Alex is on the call today, but Alex has done quite a bit of work to put this webinar together. This webinar series. There will be 2 more leading into Q1 of next year. So the design of the Americas Alliance is really to drive smart wastewater and water development in the United States. We partner with utilities, with companies that are on the leading edge of smart water utilities or smart water technologies, and drive those adoption of those technologies into the marketplace. As I said, I co-lead the event subgroup. There are 3 other groups. If anybody that's listening to this webinar is a SWAN member or not a SWAN member that's interested in joining any of these groups, please feel free to reach out to Shirley or myself. I can help connect you. We're always looking for new faces, for new partners, and it really is an interesting thing to be a part of. So I do recommend that you reach out if you have any kind of spare time to be a part of this group. Next slide. Yeah, and a big thank you to Elkin, Amanda, and Chad, who are our utility review committee. Everybody who submitted an abstract this year, there were quite a few, and they were all fantastic. Just so we were clear with our selection process, all of the abstracts went to our utility review committee, who went through a blind rating scoring procedure, and out came the selection of the presentations that we'll be seeing today, as well as the next two webinars that we're going to be presenting. But Elk and Amanda, Chad, thank you very much for your time and for putting the effort into this. Next slide. Yeah, and so that leads us to today's webinar. Data optimization, bridging silos and quantifying outcomes, really taking data, we have quite a bit of it. We're pulling sensors from all kinds of water quality, from flow, and what we do with that data is what drives our intelligence of our business. So we have three really good presentations. Bluefield Research and Esri is up first. I'm gonna let Eric and Krista introduce themselves as they get into their presentation, but I want to say a big thank you to all of our presenters today. I will also say that we're going to hold all questions until the end. If you do have a question, feel free to type it into the chat. We'll review the questions as they come up, and at the end of all three presentations, we will go over questions. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Eric and Krista, and enjoy.
Great, thanks, Brent, and thanks everybody for joining us. Really great to be here. So as Brent said, my name is Eric Bendler. I'm the Research Director for Digital Water at Bluefield Research, and I'm joined by Krista Campbell, Director of Industry Solutions for Water at Esri. So as Brent said, the focus of our panel today is on data optimization, which for us really means how to ensure that data is meaningful, it's actionable, it's useful across teams, departments, data silos. So later in the panel, you're going to be hearing some really great examples of how AI and how predictive analytics can help utility staff leverage their data to make better decisions in a couple different types of contexts. But to kick things off, Krista and I are going to talk a little bit specifically about GIS technology and the role that GIS can play in helping to integrate data sets across platforms, really put data into the hands of staff across utility organizations, and maximize the value of a utility's existing data and their digital investments. Next slide, please. So just by way of a quick agenda, we're going to start with a kind of a big picture discussion of some of the major drivers for digital transformation and for data optimization. We're then going to touch briefly on the key functions and features of modern GIS technology before digging into two case studies that are going to highlight some of the ways that GIS can help facilitate data optimization for utilities of different sizes. And then we're going to conclude with just a couple, recommendations, takeaways, lessons learned. I should note as well that our presentation is based on a joint research paper that Esri and Bluefield put out earlier in the year, and we're going to share a bit more information about that at the end of the presentation if you're interested in learning more. Next slide, please. So why now? Why is digital transformation and data optimization such an important topic for us to be talking about right now? There are dozens of reasons, but we've listed a few of what we feel to be the most important here. So, to start with, aging infrastructure is becoming more and more costly to operate and maintain, which is putting pressure on utilities to really optimize their limited financial resources. And our friends at Optimatics and Denver Water are going to share some perspectives on that a little bit later in the panel. The water workforce is aging as well, and this is certainly not a new trend in the industry, but it does seem to be getting worse in some respects during COVID. According to a recent AWWA survey that was just published, nearly a quarter of North American utilities are having trouble hiring enough people to meet their minimum staffing requirements. And that's especially the case for mission critical positions like treatment plant operators or service technicians. Third, we're seeing climate change produce more and more shocks and stresses for utilities and for their infrastructure. So according to the World Meteorological Organization, the world has seen an 8-fold increase in economic losses from climate-related disasters over the past 50 years. And our friends at Mustang Special Utility District and Specific Energy are going to share a really interesting case study about using data, using technology to maintain operations during climate disasters a little bit later in the panel as well. And then lastly, just, the technology landscape is evolving so quickly. It's really putting a lot of pressure on utilities to kind of stay up to date, to continue to enable, integration or data sharing across teams and platforms, and to maintain cybersecurity. So these are all really formidable challenges, certainly, and that's especially the case for smaller utilities with more limited, financial and technical resources. But the news isn't all bad, right? There's also really clear opportunities for utilities to transform things for the better, to improve their customer service, to make communities more sustainable and resilient, to maximize the productivity of their people, their processes, their technology. But in order to truly take advantage or harness these opportunities, utilities need to put data at the heart of their decision-making and to make investments in systems and in processes for making data more accessible, more actionable, more meaningful across the organization. Next slide, please. And so this for us is where GIS comes in. You know, GIS might seem like an odd choice. Some people still kind of see it as an older, maybe more niche technology that's only used by GIS experts. But as we argue in our research paper, a modern GIS platform can actually serve as a really strong foundation for broader digital transformation and data optimization in the industry. For one thing, GIS is first and foremost a tool for location intelligence. And if you think about it, location is really important in the water industry. You know, while we do talk about utility data being siloed off in separate systems or managed by separate departments, much or most of it is tied to location. It's tied, data is, it's tied to specific customers, to assets, to events, to processes that are occurring in or located in discrete places. And so GIS can serve as a really useful bridge between all these different systems, these different data sets, helping to maximize the value of all of that data, and laying the groundwork for some more advanced initiatives that we'll be talking about, like big data analytics or artificial intelligence or digital twins. Modern GIS technology is also built to be used by anybody across a utility. It's not just kind of a tool for GIS specialists. And so there are different applications, different tools that can be used to help different types of users access and use the data that they need to be able to do their jobs effectively, whether that's engineers or customer service reps or field crews. And then lastly, GIS technology is, to some extent already in use at most water, wastewater, and stormwater utilities around the country, around the world, including a lot of smaller and mid-sized organizations, which really makes it a great point of departure for new digital water initiatives. Next slide, please. And then just to wrap things up for me, just to get a little bit more precise with all of this, in our research with Esri, we focused on a number of specific functions and applications where we see GIS making an impact kind of outside of or beyond the GIS department, if you will. So on the left, you see different types of roles that GIS can serve, as a system for recording and managing data, for visualizing and engaging with data, and then for analyzing and deriving insights from data. And then on the right, you see a few application areas that Krista is going to delve into in more detail through some of our case studies. So coordinating operations across field and back office teams, managing disparate network assets across vast service territories, and integrating real-time data across a range of systems and sources. So with that, I'll turn it over to Krista.
Thanks, Eric. Next slide, please. Thank you. There are two case studies that I'm going to share, and they both have transformed how they work across different groups at their district. Sorry, I'm just making sure my video is being shared.
Yep, I see you, Krista.
Perfect.
Great.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so these two organizations have broken down silos. They're sharing data to work more effectively and provide a high level of service to their customers. We're going to talk about San Juan Water District, which provides drinking water supplies for retail and wholesale areas, and also White House Utility District, who provides water and wastewater services. We're starting with San Juan Water District, and the staff at San Juan Water relied on a legacy open source system that facilitated communication for them between departments. And as many of you might have experienced, the system eventually stopped working. It was a legacy system, and the one person that built it was no longer with the district. And this is what pushed San Juan to really look for a modern solution that would not only replace their old system, but provide additional benefits and improve that communication and collaboration. The engineering staff at the district really spearheaded the effort, and they wanted a system that would enable field crews, a system that would let them run advanced network analysis without returning to the office. Customer service and operations teams also had wish lists, and to ensure that everyone's needs were met, San Juan Water District hired an outside company to perform a needs assessment and identify primary requirements that would meet everyone's needs. So the new system must integrate with critical business systems, They also talked about enabling a transition from paper map books to digital resources. One of the primary requirements was providing a collaborative environment that streamlined workflows across multiple departments, not just within one department. And then they needed technology providers that would offer technical support, including online resources for training. And they needed an architecture that allowed them to host internally while providing access to staff across the organization. I'm sure you've probably guessed by now that based on our topic today, San Juan Water decided to implement an enterprise GIS. This system met all of their needs. It provided field crews with tools that enabled them to run analytics, identify the impact of outage events. It enabled operating and engineering to work together to identify vulnerabilities. It supported hydraulic modeling, and their map books transitioned to digital resources, web applications, connected engineering and customer service with field service teams. And in addition to all of this, San Juan Water created a GIS portal that provided immediate access to information across the organization. So they accomplished their goals. They broke down silos that limited communication. It's a great story. And if you'd like to learn more about their journey, I've included a QR code on this slide. It's in the lower right-hand corner. If you haven't used QR codes before, most smartphones' camera will activate the QR code and take you right to the web page where you can read the story. This story was created with Stephen A. Knott, who's an engineering technician at San Juan Water. He was super excited to share what they'd accomplished. Next slide, please. Our next case study is featuring White House Utility District. And White House has been a GIS-centric organization for several years. I included them because they're a great example of how digital transformation is a journey. So even though they're using GIS and they've made it a center of their organizations for sharing information, they continue to optimize their use of GIS and taking advantage of the maps and apps to help them meet new challenges. This case study focuses on a challenge that many of you can probably relate to: how to best serve customers during a pandemic. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the district closed its lobby for the first time in its history. Customers were no longer able to visit the district, and staff were sent home to work from home, which was something new for them as well. Luckily, the teams at White House Utility District had already been developing online applications for customers, and 2 of these played a large role in giving customers quick and easy access to tools and information during the day, during the evening. It just helped with that online option since they weren't able to come into the lobby. So 2 things that made a big difference: an online customer problem reporter and an all-inclusive customer service hub. The customer problem reporter reduced the number of calls that were coming in after hours. The after hours calls were answered by plant operators, and it caused them a lot of time away from their other duties. And so this problem reporter enabled these after hours calls to be reduced and the operators to get back to focused work. It also enabled data sharing between operators and customer service staff, and it generated automated emails to keep customers informed and up to date about their requests or complaints. And then the customer service hub enabled customers to apply for service, transfer service, update their account, enroll in auto draft, apply for leak adjustments. They could contact the district directly. They could submit a satisfaction survey, and all of this could be done via the district website. This is another great story. I've included a QR code here as well, if you'd like to take time to read more and learn a little more details about what they accomplished. Next slide, please. Many organizations, including San Juan Water and White House Utility District, are willing to share their experience and help others. As Eric mentioned, we worked together to create a digital water report, and we talked to many of our customers. We got their insight and feedback about the technologies they were using, how they were integrating their critical business systems and what really made a difference. These are the lessons learned. They really said that you need to focus on the why. And this might sound obvious, but sometimes you really jump to the how first. I know in my experience at a water utility, it was always like, well, how are we going to accomplish this? When their advice was to focus on why. Why do you need to transform? Why will it make a difference? And then you get into the what and the how. Understand your objectives. This lesson learned is about including others. You want to include stakeholders at your organization, those end users and the teams that need access to information and data, because your objectives aren't always the same as objectives from other teams. And then find a champion. I love this one. I think it's really a benefit to have a champion in your organization. I've seen this over and over with our customers and at the utilities that I supported as well. This helps with the adoption of new technology. You're always going to have some staff that don't want to try something new, sometimes just because they're scared, sometimes because it's new or they might not understand how it works. So if you have a champion who is helping to communicate the benefits and showing their team how it works, it really helps to get that change in place. And then start with quick wins. This is something that cannot be overstated. Once organizations and the different teams at organizations realize the benefit that can be gained, they're really eager to find out how it can help them, how it can improve their workflows, and what technology is available to them to transform and have access to information they may not have had access to before. So this is really valuable. It's much more valuable than just telling people that it's going to help them. Next slide. And that's all we have today. I want to thank you for your time. I do want to touch on the digital water report that Eric mentioned. I've included a QR code on this slide that will take you to the website where you can download that report. It's free. Just have to enter your name and email. I think it's a short form. We appreciate you listening today, and we're available for any follow-up. Our emails are here. Please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you, Krista and Eric. That was fantastic. I have a couple housekeeping topics I want to talk about real quick. One, this webinar is being recorded. We will distribute this following the webinar. And I don't know if I was perfectly clear. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of your control panel. If you do have questions, feel free to type that out into that Q&A tab, and we will answer. We will also distribute the question and answers in writing with the video following this presentation, this webinar. So yeah, so those three things. And then I guess next we have Dustin Blank and Rodney Seaver with Mustang Special Utility District, and Perry with Specific Energy. And I believe, Perry, you're going to be joining us during the question and answer session and not necessarily with the presentation. I may be wrong, but I'll let the three of you guys take over here and enjoy.
All right, Brent, thank you. I'm Perry Steger with Specific Energy in Austin, Texas. And this year down here in Texas, we experienced record cold temperatures and ice storms that left millions without power or subject to rolling blackouts for 3 weeks in February. And as you've likely heard, Texas has its own electric power grid that's separate from the rest of the United States. It had been a source of pride for our state, but it was proven to be our Achilles heel. And you may have also heard about frozen wind turbines and ice-coated solar panels. The underlying cause proved to be inadequate freeze protection of our natural gas transmission and power plant facilities in Texas. Next slide. There are 30 million people in Texas, and a third of them were without power for almost 2 weeks. Half the population was without drinking water, and the majority of the state experienced rolling blackouts for 8-hour stretches for multiple days. And tragically, over 200 Texans died. Next slide. So access to real-time information was was essential, and trusting this information confidently improvise is key for utilities to keep the water flowing during these times when the grid was down and electric power wasn't reliably flowing. Specific Energy, we're focused on delivering real-time analytics to municipal water industry so that they can focus on the business of delivering safe, reliable drinking water. Next slide. Specific Energy's DPO is a digital twin that's deployed at pump stations across the country. It uses real-time pressure, power, and flow measurements to predict and optimize pump station operations. It guides operators to run optimal combinations of pumps and speeds to maximize pump life while minimizing energy costs. Specific Energy's digital twin conforms to SWAN's digital twin architecture. Next slide. The unsung heroes during the Texas freeze were the utility operators that were out there in the wind and the cold and the ice storms, improvising, keeping the water flowing. We have two of those heroes with us today, Dustin Blank and Rodney Seaver. And starting with Dustin, Dustin worked for the fastest growing water utility in Texas. Dustin, please tell us about Mustang Special Utility District and some of the challenges that you faced. Next slide. And you can go to the next slide for Dustin.
All right, thanks, Perry. Yeah, I'm Dustin Blank. I'm the Water Operations Manager for Mustang Special Utility District. We're just north of DFW in Texas. So we cover over 120 square miles. We have, 50 sites. I manage half those sites and about half the personnel here at Mustang. So we got a lot going on. I've been here for about 3 years. Prior to that, I worked 9 years for another water district where we used the legacy SCADA system, and it was all you had basically had to be a SCADA computer. This digital twin that Specific Energy puts out is top notch. I was excited to get to utilize it when I came to work for Mustang, and it's a great system. So what I want to tell you about is how we utilize it during the ice storm that we had here in Texas. Most of y'all know us Texans, we don't like cold weather. I've been here my whole life. I hate cold weather. I don't know how to deal with it. So we were all in for a rude awakening when this storm hit us. Thankfully, Specific Energy made our job a little bit easier and helped us get through it. But I want to start off with, so we have a well site. I'm going to call this well site Silverado. This well site, the well pump was actually out of service during the snowstorm. And in the meantime, we were using
please.
Sorry. In the meantime, we were using another pump station, another well site to feed the ground storage tank and utilize the pump station at the Silverado site. To transfer the water to this site about 3 miles away, we had an above ground, 6-inch above ground pipe that obviously was a main concern with freezing temperatures coming in.
Excuse me, Dustin.
Yeah.
Just 1 second. Could we go to the next slide, please? Okay, thank you. Okay, keep going, Dustin. Sorry.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. Anyway, so we're feeding from Hathaway site 3 miles across town to Silverado in a 6-inch pipe laying on top of the ground, not expecting any kind of freeze. So our big concern was that pipe freezing. We wanted to make sure water was moving. So the first night of the ice storm, Hathaway loses power. We can't produce any water, and the elevated storage tank's getting critically low. We're hours away from being unable to feed water to Silverado and putting 10,000 plus people out of water. So obviously our number one concern was getting a generator over there and getting it connected and getting back up. But we had a portable generator on standby, and we dispatched it over to Hathaway. Got some electricians meet us over there and make the connections. And the electrician is telling us the generator is too small. So my first order of business is I call Specific Energy, start talking to them, and we start working through, you know, the data, the information that we have provided, and figure out that we can actually slow down the speed of the well pump through specific energy to make sure that we don't use all capacity of the generator. And thankfully we were able to do that, and we were able to run just the well pump just enough using that smaller generator to maintain a level in the elevated storage tank, which would provide constant flow over to Silverado. Meanwhile, we were also letting this temporary pipe above ground, we had it open on the end just to keep it flushing, so you know the pipe wouldn't freeze. Ultimately, Specific Energy helped us save the day. I mean, it was great to have them be able to help us out, us be able to control and adjust flows real time, anywhere, any place. You know, we were confident enough that we didn't have to have anybody on site at all times. We knew if that generator turned off, I was going to get an alarm, or one of our team members were going to receive an alarm that we could dispatch somebody out there, immediately get that generator going and get that pump back up and running. Next slide. So this graph here is showing a day during the ice storm, and as you can see on the top, you can see the rolling blackouts all throughout the day. You know, throughout this whole day, you can see rolling blackouts, and that's our Temple Dane pump station, our biggest pump station. That was feeding 50,000 people, and on the bottom is another pump station tied on the same system. Thankfully, we could see both, and we could alternate these pump stations with Specific Energy. So I could be watching real time when our main pump station, Temple Dane, would go down. I could flip over to Houlihan and rely on Houlihan while Temple Dane was down. So during this snowstorm, ultimately, you know, we were able to keep every one of our customers with water with the help of Specific Energy. You know, they really helped us out. I was really proud of them, proud to be a customer of theirs, and they really helped us out. Thanks. Next.
Justin. Next slide. Thanks. I want to introduce our next hero. In February, during the freeze, Rodney Seaver was working for Kempner Water Supply Corporation. It's a sprawling Central Texas water utility that faced its own set of challenges. So Rodney, take it away. Next slide.
Y'all hear me? Okay, so I'm Rodney Seaver, and I was a distribution manager for Kempner Water Supply. I have since joined Dustin in Mustang as his assistant. So this was before we knew each other, unrelated water companies, but I'd already installed DP mode from Specific Energy, a pump optimizing program, on a pump station that had several miles of suction line, 10-inch suction line, and several miles of discharge line that fed another ground storage tank, and then another little pump station that in turn supplied about 1,700 connections. And I was already benefiting the DP mode before this freeze broke out. Because we were the VFDs were not capable of handling the water hammer, and we were continually breaking suction lines and discharge lines until we optimized our pumps and had the digital twin applications on it. It ran a smooth transit line going into this freeze. We'd already taken care of some of them problems, but another problem arrived. We lost the downstream ground storage tank and pump station to the electrical outages and the freeze. And then in this picture right here that we're looking at, we had to use some primitive ways of dealing with some of our problems, like the exposed lines that never have in Texas froze before. But the behind the scenes was I managed to call Specific Energy. They optimized our VFDs and ran 2 pumps when it was only designed to run 1 pump on and off, and we directly pumped in and bypassed the ground storage tank and never lost pressure to 1,700 customers downstream from that. I don't know of any other program that could have managed to do this without blowing stuff and having high transits, for the 7 days we had all this weather. So the real heroes was Pacific Energy, optimizing our pumps and putting them in the right curves and doing all the electronic stuff that we were capable of building fires, as you can see, but this other stuff is truly amazing. So thank you, Perry.
Thanks a lot, Rodney. And next slide. I think we'll hold the questions to the end of all the presentations. Rodney and Dustin, thank you all so much, and look forward to hearing from Suez and Optimatics next. So Brent, we'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, guys. Really good presentation. Really good. Yeah, so a reminder, if you have any questions, feel free to type it into the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. We have some dedicated time at the end of this. I just wanted to answer a couple quick questions. The slides will be distributed after the webinar, along with the consolidated Q&A questions and the recording of the webinar. And with that, we're going to turn this over to Josh with Optimatics and Jacqueline with Denver Water. I'll let you go through some specific introductions on your own, but the floor is yours.
Thanks, Brent. This is Josh Cantone from Optimatics. Thanks certainly for hosting us. I'm the CEO of the Optimatics team. Very excited to present today with Jacqueline Gorman from Denver Water. I'll let her introduce herself. She's going to kick off the presentation, but we're going to give an overview of a project that we've been working on with Denver Water, developing a new tool to help them optimize their mains renewals packaging and planning for Denver Water. So thanks for being here, and Jacqueline, it's over to you. Next slide.
Yeah, my name is Jacqueline Gorman. I work at Denver Water in the hydraulics department as a senior engineering specialist. So my main function is planning the main renewal program. And again, just so it's in everyone's back of the head, this is just for our main renewal, not for our other capital projects involving conduits, bolts, and that type of those types of projects. So this is just for our main renewal. So I'm just going to go over some quick facts and kind of just some general information about Denver Water, go over our main replacement program, and then kind of why we chose Optimatics moving forward. This will be really high level, so if anyone has any specific questions or wants to contact me after the presentation, feel free. So Denver Water was established in 1918. It currently serves 25% of the state's population. Our service area is 335 square miles, including the city of Denver and several of our suburban distributors. And as you can see from this, we have a complex system of reservoirs connected by tunnels and canals. And of that 25%, that's approximately 1.5 million people. Next slide. Here's an overview map of our system. The orange line is the representation of the Continental Divide. Denver Water's collection system covers 4,000 square miles or 2.5 million acres. We extend into over 8 counties throughout the state. We have 2 main geographical systems, a north supply and a south supply. And within those 2 systems, we have 3 collection systems: the Moffett Collection System, Roberts Tunnel Collection System, and South Platte Collection System. And you can kind of see that gray area that says Denver. That's the outline of our distribution system. Next slide. So Denver Water currently manages approximately 3,000 miles of main. Our earliest main was installed that we currently still have in our system in the 1890s. As of 2021, Denver Water is installing approximately 100,000 to 120,000 feet of main a year. And kind of like the slide says, our main objectives are to minimize life cycle costs and to maintain a high level of service. We really want to reduce neighborhood impacts and make sure we provide enough pressure and flow for both our customers and for the fire department. Our program currently is fairly reactive, and if you look at our overview and the next bullet, we're right now we're focusing mainly on repairing and avoiding main breaks and replacing corroded pipe. We do have area built into our budget for system improvements, but the idea behind working with Optimatics was to move more into a proactive approach to main replacement instead of being reactive. Next slide. And so here are a few of our studies that we did kind of prior leading up to our working with Optimatics. The first study was done, it was our canoe study in 2011. We hired a firm to revise our long-term replacement need forecast. And basically, we wanted to figure out what were our pipe cohorts and sub-cohorts, and what was the useful life range of each of those pipe cohorts. The other big objective was how much main do we have to replace a year to both keep up with our aging infrastructure, but also to make up some of our backlog. And as you can see in those bullets, the one big takeaway was that our spun cast iron cohort, which is our cast iron from the 1940s through the 1960s, and then also secondary was our gray cast iron, or what we call gray cast iron, from the 1960s through the 1970s, were actually our worst cohort of cast iron breaking in our system. It wasn't the oldest main from the 1890s. And then the other big takeaway was that in order to maintain and actually catch up on our replacement, we had to be at approximately 1.5% of our system per year doing replacements. And at this time, in 2011, we were closer to about 0.3 or 0.6%, depending on the year. And the probability of failure study was a study that we started in 2018. We utilized 3 different companies. In the future, we'll probably go with one company, but we kind of just wanted to, it's a newer technology, or newer for utilities to be using. So we kind of wanted to see which models best benefited our system. And so the big takeaway of this was we already knew from the canoe study what main was breaking and how much we had to replace. But there's, as you'll see in the next slide, a fairly large amount of cast iron that's breaking. So how do we rank the pipes? How do we build projects off those pipes? So if you can go to the next slide, please. So this is just a graph of our main footage. And I have the spun cast iron highlighted in red and the gray cast iron highlighted in orange. So that represents 23% of the cast iron that was breaking in our system, and that represents 80% of our breaks. So, we know from those studies what we need to replace. And as you can see, there's this little section of main that requires our most attention. So next slide. So in the past, we pretty much focused on a kind of like mantra of 2 breaks in 1 year, 3 breaks on 5 years, in 5 years, or 5 breaks total as a criteria for kind of centralizing our projects. We know the useful life of the main, we know the probability of failure, and how to rank the main, and we know the level of service we need to extend in order to maintain our existing customer level of service. And so I feel like we had a fairly modern approach. We do use ArcGIS Pro and services. We have built-in Python scripts and model builder, but it was fairly manual and labor intensive, and everything was built based on a single computer. And so how do we move forward, and how do we become less reactive and more proactive? And then also, how do we reach out to our stakeholders? So if you go to the next slide, please. So that's why we started engaging in a software that we could use, and that's why we ended up choosing Optimizer and Optimatics. We wanted something that was defensible and repeatable, how to make informed decisions, and not only work with our customers, but also how do we reach out to our internal stakeholders, kind of similar to what Esri presented on in the first presentation. How do you reach all the stakeholders, whether it's engineering, O&M, and how do you provide a multi-objective solution that can adapt to the future of our needs? We're not always going to need a reactive model. We're going to want a proactive model. We're going to want to select on lead service lines currently, or do we want to select on fire flow and deficiencies in our system? And so that was a big thing for us and why we chose Optimizer. We wanted something that we could build a partnership with and not be fully dependent on. We wanted to be able to customize for our specific projects and our specific needs. And with that, I'll turn it over to Josh. Next slide.
Thanks, Jacqueline. So yeah, I guess one of the key parts of this, as Jacqueline's outlined, is that Denver Water was already on a journey in terms of trying to help optimize this sort of mains renewal planning process, and so they had a lot of existing information that came from a variety of sources, and so they were already using ArcGIS to kind of aggregate that information and get it in the one spot, which is great. And they'd already invested in some other tools to help them understand a little bit more about the individual assets. And so what we were trying to focus on when we started working with Denver Water was to understand, well, how do they want to, sort of get those packages built, and what are the factors that contribute, but really provide more of an automated tool for doing that, one that leveraged their existing investments in GIS and these other studies and even other tools that they'd previously used, and try to bring that together in an optimization tool that would allow them to generate outputs in a more automated fashion and a more optimal fashion. So what is Optimizer? Optimizer is really a multi-objective decision support system that allows you to bring in different inputs and put in different constraints, and then it's going to use artificial intelligence, in particular evolutionary algorithms, to search for different strategies, different plans in terms of renewal plans for Denver Water to meet their target replacement rate of that 1.5% for as low of cost as possible, but also taking into account these different criteria and constraints. Next slide. So one of the first things that we did, as Jacqueline mentioned, this was really a collaborative project and development. Optimizer has been around for a while. The platform's there. We'd worked on a similar project with WSSC, trying to look at this mains packaging previously, but Denver Water had different criteria. So we started to understand what was important to them. Obviously, the leaks and breaks are important. The community impact was important. Having certain ranges of packages for construction was important. So Denver Water does do some replacement themselves. They also potentially outsource some. So it was a matter of finding different package sizes was important. So having some spending equitably across their service region. This is also something that was really important, and it's something that a lot of our different customers are really looking towards. And so having something that's more transparent and an approach to that was one of the key criteria here. Next slide. So you might say, well, okay, how do you kind of take those criteria and decide what's important or what's more important or less important? And this is one of the challenges. This is one of the things that we've been continuing to work on with Denver Water, is identifying, well, what are the most important factors? How do you weight them, if you like, and how do you sort of trade them off? And so what Optimizer ultimately does is give you the ability to trade off different criteria and objectives. So we took a lot of the individual criteria that Denver Water were interested in, things like leakage history, fire flow deficiencies, material types, and we combined that into a performance objective. And so really looking to optimize and minimize the risk associated with their assets. And we traded that off against the buildability objective. So obviously we want certain package sizes. If we're able to coordinate with road moratoriums or proactive road replacements, then we want to do that as well. So it was really a trade-off between performance and if you like, buildability or community impact. Next slide. So obviously we don't have a lot of time, so I'm not going to go into the mechanics of all of this, but essentially what are the outputs from Optimizer and how we're using those? So, Jacqueline and Marie from the Optimatics team have been working to really kind of provide an output that's really usable. And so the first thing that you get is this trade-off curve. So in the top right corner there, you see what we call a Pareto front, and that allows us to trade off buildability versus performance. And so each one of those dots is an individual mains renewal strategy for a year for Denver Water. So it's going to be targeting that 1.5% or that 100,000 feet of main to replace in different packages. And so the next plot you see below is really how those different strategies or different plans trade off against each other. So the one in red is the existing strategy, which is the do nothing. And then the other blue lines you can see there's a balance between some of these plans are better at reducing leaks. Some of them are better in terms of reducing fire flow deficiencies. And so you're able to trade those off against each other. So that's what we've been doing with Denver Water. If you go to the next slide, one of the first things that we did is we wanted to test how well was Optimizer doing in terms of comparing to a manually developed plan. So, you know, one of the things that we did is we tested Optimizer against what Denver Water would have selected in a given year, and tried to understand, was Optimizer selecting packages that were in line with sort of the traditional approach that Denver Water would take. So that, you know, here we're trying to ensure that we're not missing anything, that we are able to come up with those high priority packages in a more automated fashion and in a more transparent fashion. So, you know, essentially the idea here is that we were able to do it. Optimizer was able to generate those packages. We've now extrapolated this methodology to the entire Denver Water service area, and it's starting to be used by Jacqueline more regularly in her planning cycle for coming up with these plans and strategies. And so as a final slide, I want to leave some time here for questions. You know, where does all that information go? Well, if you see the next slide, again, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. So Denver Water is a customer. They use ArcGIS, for example, a lot. And so we started by taking water from ArcGIS. We ended by sending data directly from Optimizer to ArcGIS Online. And the idea here being that, you know, Jacqueline can interface with the stakeholders at Denver Water, show them different plans and show them to the stakeholders visually in terms of, you know, you see there in red the pipes that are being selected for a given package. And you can also see specific metrics that Denver Water is interested in for each of those packages and holistically for the system as a whole. So we're working on continuing to tailor that dashboard to give the insights that we need with Denver Water. But, you know, one of the nice things is that this platform, ArcGIS Online, is available to the key stakeholders. And so no need for them to install Optimizer or be running that software, but they can interact through an investment they've already made with that software as well. That's I think all we had. So I know that was reasonably quick, and I'm sure there are questions, but happy to answer those. This continues to be an evolving process for Denver Water, but the tool is now built and starting to be used and refined. And I think Jacqueline's done a really terrific job in working with our team to help understand what their real objectives are and how we can move forward.
Josh, that was fantastic. And Jacqueline, and while I still have you guys here and teed up, I want to direct the first question that we've received, you know, from the chat box, but also from a couple of other people have worded it slightly different, but I think is pretty close to the same question. It comes down to the optimization and how utilities or how Optimatics selects the criteria related to the input data. Is that done by Optimatics? Is it done by utility? And then add-on question to that is, do you see any differences in the selection process between the size of the utility?
Yeah, I can let Jacqueline answer part of this in terms of the criteria. Do you just want to talk a little bit to that, Jacqueline, and in terms of how those were defined?
Sure, yeah. We had some specific criteria that we used, but in order to prepare it for the optimization, it was, like I kind of mentioned, like we wanted to have a partnership with Optimatics. And so it's really, you know, me working with Josh's group to figure out how to best create the equations that the artificial intelligence was going to use. And it is a lot of testing. It's a lot of back and forth and reviewing. And that's why we kind of moved to that test area so we could run Optimizer faster and kind of see immediate feedback of what we needed to do to not only pick things that we would normally pick, but then also to find some of those other projects that we were missing.
Yeah. And I think, you know, just to tag on to that, Brent, and answer the other part of your question. So, you know, Optimatics was involved in sort of building some baseline functionality. There was some of that, you know, a lot of the core of the platform's already there. We had those projects with WSSC, which we already had as well. But we built specific criteria for Denver Water, and then they're able to kind of play dynamically with the weights of which criteria they want in each objective. that's something that Jacqueline's doing and refining as she goes. In terms of other utilities, I can comment that, obviously we've done this with WSSC, I've mentioned, which is a big utility. They have different criteria, slightly different mix of things that are important to them. We've also done it recently with a couple of smaller utilities, Howard County out in Baltimore, a small Suez contract in Merchantville, Pennsylvania. And so, in both of those cases, different criteria, slight variations on this, but we're seeing our customers, both big and small, benefit from this. Obviously, if you're replacing a very small amount of pipe, something to this scale is not going to be beneficial. But, there are a lot of utilities who really are trying to be more proactive and more transparent. And I think that's an really important point.
Fantastic. Thanks, Josh. So we have a question from, and I'm going to apologize, I'm going to butcher the name, Bobin Bayani. What analytics or data visualization platform does Specific Energy use? So that's for you, Perry.
Okay, great. Yeah, we use a secure cloud platform, and of course you can access our live user interface via any web browser. We also have smartphone applications as well. There's more information to be had at specificenergy.com.
Excellent. Eric and Krista, generalized question here. What advice would you give a utility trying to leverage their current GIS program, and what are the low-hanging fruits they could attack first?
I can start, Eric, if you want to chime in after I'm done. I think that the low-hanging fruit are usually specific workflows that you would like to improve. For example, a lot of our small organizations really start with that digital map and then sharing that map with their field crews and office staff. So having the digital map available in applications makes it really easy. And the dashboards that were shown in the other presentations are also a great tool. And those dashboards can be configured to visualize any data or information you have. And as mentioned by the other presenters, those are often available across the organization as part of their existing licensing. So low-hanging fruit is really important for those wins and the champions that we discussed in our presentation. Was there another part of that question I missed?
No, I think you got it, Krista. Yeah.
Perfect. Eric, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just add, in doing the research report, as Krista mentioned, we spoke with a number of Esri users, a number of clients. And I think one of the things that I found really interesting was just the level of kind of collaboration and engagement between like the utilities GIS specialist or the person driving the project and their kind of colleagues, their stakeholders in other parts of the organization. So I know, we talked about that. I think Josh and Jacqueline, kind of focused on that as well. I think it is a really important area to prioritize, just getting people kind of talking about what the priorities are going to be. In the case of some of the clients that we worked with for the report, just the GIS specialists kind of getting feedback from a particular department or a particular group of stakeholders in terms of what they would like to see, and kind of building that for them and then giving it to them, giving them kind of that ownership over, this is what your own data looks like in a GIS platform. This is how you can use it. This is how you can keep it up to date, kind of building that buy-in and that ownership across each kind of department in the organization, I think is also super valuable.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Krista. So we didn't get to all the questions, and I apologize. We ran out of time here, but I wanted to say a thank you to all of our presenters today. I think the presentations were fantastic. Thank you to Shirley for helping organize, and to my co-lead, Alex, who I don't believe is here today. We will put all of these questions in writing and ask our panelists to answer the questions in writing, and then we'll distribute this with a copy of the recording and the slide deck. And with that, I think we'll close out the webinar for today. Thank you to everybody. And thank you to our committee review who did take the time to review these presentations today in the future webinar. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Shirley. Thank you, all of our presenters. Have a good week. Enjoy.
Well done. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.